topic of Israel, Senator, do you think there's a possibility of Benjamin Netanyahu returning to power in Israel, first of all? And then secondly, what is being done to make sure that the Iron Dome funding is continuing? And what is being done to ensure that Israel knows that conservatives will continue to support them, even though this administration is not?
Yeah, great question. Could Bibi come back? Absolutely yes. As it so happened, I was in Israel, I was in Jerusalem, the day that the new government in Israel filed its papers. And I was actually meeting with Netanyahu that day. So we had a meeting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I know Bibi well. He is a friend. He is an incredible leader. Because he was literally seeing his government taken down that day, I told him, I said, look, if you need to cut this meeting short, if you need to be on the phone to other members of the Knesset, I get it. I will not be offended. And, you know, he kind of shrugged. He said, look, it is what it is. We went back in his office and spent an hour and a half talking. I have to tell you as an aside, I'm going to get to the direct question, but I will tell you one of my favorite experiences the whole time I've been in the Senate was back, I think it was 2014. And I was in Israel, I was in Jerusalem, and had a meeting with Bibi. And this is Obama's president. John Kerry is Secretary of State. And the U.S. ambassador, Daniel Shapiro, the U.S. ambassador, did not want me to meet with Bibi. And he said, I'm coming to the meeting. And I said, well, that's nice to know. But no, you're not. And he came back and said, well, if you don't let me come to this meeting, we'll pull your security. And I smiled and said, that's fine. If you want to pull the security, I'll hire private security within the hour. This is a meeting that I set up. This is a trip that I set up. I'm going to the meeting, and you're not invited. Now, Ambassador Shapiro, I mean, he's a nice enough fellow, but he's not a very big guy. We're literally standing on the steps of the Knesset, and we are bumping chests. I mean, it is 7th grade, like ready to throw down. And it was clear that John Kerry had told him, you don't let Cruz anywhere near Netanyahu without you recording every word they say. Well, at the end of the day, I was pretty confident his threat was a bluff. It was a bluff. He backed down. The next day I met with Bibi, spent 2 hours in his office. I will say there may or may not have been some Cuban cigars that were destroyed in the process. As a Cuban American, I have a policy towards my father's homeland, which is I burn their crops. That remains among the coolest things I've ever done, to sit in Benjamin Netanyahu's office, smoking a cigar, discussing geopolitics. You kind of look around and are like, all right, holy cow, this is wild. Could he come back? Sure. The current government is an unusual coalition, to say the least. They're united by one thing, which is they can't stand Netanyahu. So it would be like if Bernie Sanders and I entered into a coalition government. I don't know how that would work. So far they've survived. Now listen, I also think, and this is important, whatever the government is of Israel, we will deal with them as our friend. It's not America's place to choose who Israel's leader should be. Obama was shameful going and campaigning against Netanyahu. Netanyahu's a friend, but it's up to the people of Israel who their leader will be. But could he come back? Sure. Second question, Iron Dome. Look, one of the real illustrations of, for a long time, one of the great strengths we had in the U.S.-Israel relationship was a bipartisan commitment to it. That's important. That bipartisan commitment matters. Probably the thing that worries me the most for the long-term strength of the U.S.-Israel relationship is just how weakened that bipartisan support has been. And I'll tell you when it was. I was there when it happened. It was weakened during the negotiation of the Obama-Iran nuclear deal. Because what happened is the Obama White House said to Democratic senators, you pick. You either support Israel or you're a Democrat. One or the other. You can't have both. And almost every Democratic senator bowed under and supported the deal. And it changed how Congress deals with Israel. If you remember, about that time, Netanyahu came, addressed a joint session of Congress. It was an incredible address. I was there. A lot of Democratic members of Congress boycotted the speech, refused to listen to Israel's prime minister. I organized an event at the Capitol that day with Elie Wiesel. And Elie wanted it to be bipartisan. He wanted a Democrat. So we invited Chuck Schumer. He said no. We invited Dick Durbin. He said no. We went down Democrat after Democrat after Democrat. Every single one turned us down. Not just senators, House members. We could not get a Democrat. So we had a room as full, even more full than this gathering. It ended up just being Elie and me. Because no Democrat was there. And I will say, to sit at a table with someone like Elie Wiesel, someone with a moral gravity, it took your breath away. And when Elie would say never again means never again, and the one threat on planet Earth that could murder 6 million Jews again is a nuclear Iran. Those are words we need to listen to, but sadly, no Democrat would attend. Fast forward to now, Iron Dome. Joe Biden gets elected, goes back to the strategic ambiguity. What happens? Hamas rains 4,000 rockets onto Israel. It was a test. It's a test to Joe Biden. He failed that test. Immediately begins blaming both sides. You know, the terrorists firing the rockets and the innocent people being killed. Obviously equally culpable. Right after the rocket attack ended, I flew to Israel to express my solidarity. I actually wanted to go right at the end and state through impediments in our way to delay our trip because they didn't want me to go. But at the time, we met with top leadership. Israel needed about $1 billion in munitions to replenish Iron Dome. Iron Dome is incredible. By the way, the company that produces Iron Dome is Rafael Industries. Many of you know my father, Rafael Cruz. My name is Rafael. I said, look, I love Israel, but to name the company after us, holy cow, that's really nice. That made me feel wonderful. Look, they need those munitions, and those munitions save lives. They save Israeli lives, and they save Palestinian lives. They save lives everywhere. So the House took up replenishing Iron Dome, and AOC and the squad objected. And Nancy Pelosi and Democratic leaders caved and stripped it out. And if you recall, there's an image even then of AOC, I guess, abstaining, and she's like crying on the floor with her vote. What the hell are you doing? I've never cried after a vote. If you're representing your constituents and your principles, you shouldn't cry when you're voting. If you're playing politics, then maybe you should cry. So, Pelosi gave in to AOC, stripped it out of the continuing resolution. Then Pelosi passed it separately on a bill that Chuck Schumer won't bring up for a vote. So it's been months since the House passed it. We can't get a vote on it. I have a bill in the Senate. Chuck Schumer won't bring my bill up in the Senate to replenish Iron Dome. He won't bring the bill up that passed the House to replenish Iron Dome. Why? Because Schumer's scared of AOC primarying him from the left in New York. So, look, is there a chance that it gets attached to a continuing resolution, to an omnibus, to some must-pass vehicle? Yeah, maybe. It might. But we could have passed it last week instead of the failure theater that Schumer scheduled. There is one person on planet Earth that has control over floor time in the Senate, and his name is Charles Schumer, the majority leader. He has absolute control. He could have passed it any day or any week for the last 4 months, and he refused to schedule floor time to vote on it. So I hope we will get it done, but it all comes down to if enough Democrats will have the courage to stand up to the anti-Semitic squad in the far left of their own party.